Join me every month for the inspiration to find your finish line. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Find Your Finish Line, presented by Curad, the official medical supplier of Ironman. Kinesiology tape, there it is, the best you can get. And Activice, the official topical pain relief partner of Ironman. I love the roll-on. You can find the products on Ironman.com, at Walmart, and on Amazon.com. First off, I'd like to thank you all for submitting your auction bids for my rally towel. That rally towel has been with me a long time, and I decided to auction it off for all proceeds going to the Ironman Foundation. And a gentleman in Florida got it, and I appreciate all the money you've donated to the Ironman Foundation through getting my rally towel. So thank you very much for that, everybody. It's all about giving back, that's for sure. Well, this episode, I'm very excited about this episode. The guest and I, Mike Trees, have been going back and forth trying to get on the podcast, schedules and traveling and all that good stuff. But this episode is about running. Mike's a professional athlete. He was a pro athlete for about 20 plus years, 7-time Masters world champion in running 10,000 meters. He's one of the top running and triathlon coaches in the world today. Hello, Mike. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, doing great. Thanks very much. And thanks very much for having me on the podcast. And thanks for being with us for so many years through the sport. It's great to actually chat to you in more detail.
No worries. I'm happy to have you on. And I always ask my guests to right up straight, because you're right now across the pond. And I always ask them straight up, did you get a workout in today, Mike?
I've got a coffee here. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. I woke up at 5:30. Normally it would have been yes, but today no. This is the first thing I'm doing. So yes, but I'm a morning guy, and I love to train first thing in the morning when I wake up, but not today.
Well, you were born and raised in the UK. You're now living full time in Auckland. Where are you at right now?
So I'm actually in Queenstown, possibly the most beautiful place in the world. A few people might argue with that.
I agree. As a matter of fact, when we did a trip down from Ironman New Zealand to Queenstown, I just didn't want to leave.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely stunning. And the weather is awesome at the moment. So it reminds me very much of Colorado and Boulder when I used to spend time out there. It's sunny, it's cool in the morning, perfect for training. I mean, it's idyllic. I wonder why it took me so long to move to this country.
It's funny, at Ironman New Zealand, which I just got back from, my older brother went with me, and he's been all over the world, but he's never been to New Zealand. We're having lunch one day, and he goes, you know what? I can move here. I mean, and I had that same feeling, obviously, with family connections and all that good stuff. I couldn't do it, but there's a place I could go. So we just did a great New Zealand bit for the Chamber of Commerce out of New Zealand to have some Americans and world travelers get down there, because you will be enamored. Well, as I said, running, that's what this is all about. Before we jump into all of that, Mike, tell us a little bit about your background and as an athlete and a coach.
Whoa, it's that could fill a podcast. I'm getting on these days, but I started running at the age of 9, and I came from an era where there's Coe, Overt, Steve Cram, and from a part of the northeast of England where the running level was very high. In fact, at university, I famously say I was the 5th fastest runner in my geography class. But it just happened that we had, international runners all around us. And so I didn't think I was very good, but I was very lucky one day to turn up to the British University track championships, and I won the 1500 meters. Basically because I felt the faster guys were overseas and elsewhere, but this title, it gave me some kudos. It allowed me to travel around the world and ultimately got me some sponsorship in Japan to run in Japan. And then when I was running in Japan, I managed to get, under 30 minutes. I got down to 28:50 for 10,000 on the roads. So I was a solid runner, never really a top class runner, but I was coaching at this time as well at university while I was doing this running. And then I went back to England after Japan and studied Japanese. And that was, after studying Japanese, that was a sports scholarship I did that. I got into triathlon at that period, I was very lucky to win the British Duathlon Championships, the inaugural Duathlon Championships, and then took those 2 titles back to Japan and got sponsorship and stayed there for maybe 20 years, running and doing triathlon. And I coached their national athletes over there, elite and Olympic athletes, as well as age groupers and beyond. And during that time, I was lucky enough to notch up, I think, I lose track now, I'm getting on, 9 national titles, from Olympic distance triathlon champion, long distance champion, to duathlon titles. And so never really made it as a top grade athlete. I was famously called by some of the guys a cherry picker, which I loved because, I was what I like to think when I was racing was I was an international cherry picker. I'd go to races where I could have an impact, where I could win. And then once in a while, I'd go to the World Championships and get my butt kicked and see really where I fitted in the world scheme. But along the way, I learned a lot. I studied sports science and a very potted history. That's how I got to where I am now. I retired. I did a little bit of sports business, distribution of sportswear, but really training and coaching has been my passion. And that's what I got into when I sold our business. And the last 7 years, I've been full-time again back into coaching. Initially, I coached Olympic level elite athletes. Now I focus on age groupers and beginners and novice runners. I'm realizing the huge health market. Mm-hmm. And I want to get as many athletes into the sport as I can and get the word out on as many platforms as I can, how to run and enjoy your running and get fitter and healthier, because that's what it's all about. And so that's in a very potted history of where I am.
Well, Mike, it's interesting. I've talked to a lot of people and talked to a lot of athletes that weren't, as you say, that world class. Hey, you run 28 minutes, you're world class to me. Let me tell you that right now, okay, for the 10K. But a lot of athletes that weren't, world champions, but they were always in the mix, or they were always competing. Why is it that I see a lot of those types of athletes become the better coaches in the world? What do you think that is?
It's a very good question. Before I answer that directly, I coached, for example, Hirokatsu Tayama. He was a 4-time Olympian in Japan. I coached professional athletes. And I came back to England thinking I was a good coach. And I coached the guy and I said, this is what I'd like you to do. And he looked at me and he said, I have a job. Get real. And I said, wow, I don't know how to coach real people in the real world. But what I did do when I eventually got my head around it was I became better. And I think I have more, or not me, but we have to have more of an understanding that we never quite made the top. We know the problems. I'm not the world's greatest swimmer. I think that helps me become a better swim coach because I'm working on my form and constantly working on how to improve it. I remember asking an Olympic swimmer to help me swim, and he famously said to me, well, you just turn your shoulders over, don't you? Turn the shoulders, catch the water and push it out the back. And he wasn't a good coach because it came so naturally to him. And I think because it doesn't come as naturally to us, we've worked a lot. We study more and try harder. I think that's the premise of it. I mean, I might be wrong, but I, from my point of view, that's where I sit, that I've studied harder to try and get there. I never quite made it to the top, so I had to work harder, and I want to pass on that knowledge that I've picked up along the way.
Mike, and I'll ask this as a general question because running is my background. It always has been, and it's the basis for almost everything out there, especially in swim, bike, run. But how do you think the sport of running is doing today? Do you think running kind of basically saved so many people during the pandemic? Is it that type of thing, or how do you think running's doing?
I think at the entry level, running is doing phenomenally well. I been doing some work in Indonesia just before the pandemic, and 20 years ago, that people talk, it didn't exist as a sport. Nobody ran. Now in Indonesia, there are runners everywhere. A big proportion of my followers are from Indonesia. They're hungry for knowledge and they're really keen to learn how to run. It's a boom that we had, I think the first boom that Nike created really back in the 70s, the running boom. And at the entry level, it's doing well. At the top level, The super shoes, as they're called now, has taken these new records and got a new interest in the sport. And I think people like to see records being broken, so it's exciting at the top end of the sport, and that pulls people in at the bottom end. And of course, as you and I know, there's no real relationship between the elite runners and the fun runners that come in. They're totally different animals, beasts, and have total different abilities and time to train. But it's nice to have that spectrum where the marathon running is popular and people are aspiring to marathon running. But I think what my job is when I talk about running, I'm just getting off the subject a little bit, is I try and get people not to focus on the distance. I mean, Ironman, again, it comes back to that. People want to do the Ironman. When they do triathlons, I say, well, let's focus on doing short distance correctly. Let's focus on doing 5Ks and 10Ks correctly. Enjoy them, build up the base before you move on the distance. And when I say that my favorite distance is 5K, it surprises people because they say, oh, I thought you'd be doing marathons. And I say, well, no, 5K is my favorite distance. Some people it's marathons, but don't be embarrassed that your distance that you like is short. You may enjoy shorter distance more than long distances. I think marathon has become proportionally, it's put on a pedestal. People think that they've just got to go longer and further all the time. And the same with Ironman. It's a great thing to aim at, but I don't think it has to be the goal of all runners to go as far as they can. It's just to enjoy their running, and it might be that they enjoy running shorter distances. But the sport's doing well, really well.
You know, Mike, I'm so glad to hear you say that. I mean, I'm going back to the 80s when I and a lot of my friends were running a lot, and the hardest, and I ran, a bunch of marathons and the whole deal and 10Ks, but the 5K was always my litmus test. The 5K, I seemed to work harder, have more mental strain, oxygen debt. I don't know. That 5K was such a character builder, for people that wanted to move on. And I had pain in marathons and pain in half marathons, but for some reason, that 5K seemed to be that distance to test you more than anything else. Why was that? Why is that?
Well, interestingly, when we run long distances such as the marathon, you're probably 99% aerobic, and it's getting the muscles to work over a long time and get that muscular endurance. The 5K. At our level, if you train correctly, you're probably about 75% aerobic, which is using the oxygen that you take in to fire the muscles, but about 25% anaerobic. So this oxygen debt, which the muscles have to work without oxygen being created. And if you go too fast too soon, this oxygen debt blocks the aerobic pathways and it hurts. Your legs turn to jelly and you're going nowhere. You push harder and harder and get slower and slower. So you've got to work out the balance, and you've got to train both systems, the aerobic anaerobic system, which makes it a great challenge. And so it's a different kind of pain. Yeah, the Ironman, the marathon, is a long, slow, drawn out pain. Whereas this one, it's short and hard, and it hits you really hard. That's why I like the challenge of the shorter distances, getting that balance right.
So you talked earlier, Mike, about, working with beginners and new people coming in. How do you answer someone who says, well, no matter where it's at, if you're at a party, you're talking to someone about what you do, but how do you answer them saying, I can't run. I have bad knees. I have this, I have that. I can't run. Because I hear that a lot too, and I don't believe any of them, but how do you answer that?
So until this year, it was hard, but now I've got a good answer. So I crashed my bike early this year, and I smashed both my femur and my hip. So my leg is held together with titanium rods, and my hip's held together with rods. And 6 months after doing that, I completed the Ironman in Kona and managed to run a sub 4-hour marathon. So the doctors said that pushed back the boundaries of, orthopedic recovery. So from one sense, I felt good, but it taught me a lot that I had to learn to walk first from that case. So I was in a wheelchair. I then had to manually teach my muscles to get the proprioception back so they could fire automatically. So I had to teach myself to run from day one, from scratch. And so what I do to these people, I say, well, look, we can, if you can walk, you can run. You can walk 100 meters, run 100 meters. Walk 100, run 100. That might be it. So on day one, that's as far as you go. And then incrementally, and we all hear of the 10% rule, which is good and bad, but you incrementally add on a little bit to the distance. But then you don't just do the running. You have to build up. For example, if you have a car and the chassis of the car is weak and the engine becomes strong, the car's going to break down. So the same with running. You need to go at the gym a little bit, and you might not like it, but you've got to build up some core muscles to build up the leg muscles. Running doesn't build up many muscles. That's the problem with it. When you race pace, you don't use a lot of muscles, but you need to build up those leg muscles and the strength. So I get people to go to the gym and give them a very simple workout in the gym. I get them to run, walk, and then I get them to do drills to fire and use to activating the muscles. And I went through that same routine myself. I went to the gym, I did the drills, and I started on a hill because there's less stress on the body going uphill, doing the drills, and I did run walks, and bit by bit I progressed. And that's how I do it with runners. And anyone can run, I believe, if you put the time in and then consistent over time.
Well, Mike, I going back to your accident, when that happened and following you and your progression the entire time, I was amazed at how fast you did come back. So congratulations on that. And we're in a world, especially triathlon, with people riding bikes and they get injured, and so many, may have a crash and following them back. But the foundation is there, so people do get back quickly, and I was glad to see you do that.
Thank you very much.
What when someone's starting to run, Mike, what do you advise them is what their number one goal should be?
The number one goal is to have fun for me. Always to have fun. It's a hobby, and if we're not having fun, we're not going to do it. So they need to get a time. So the overriding thing with everything I do is let's have fun. If you're not having fun, find a new sport. Maybe running's not for you in the sense that you're not enjoying it. So you can run if you want to do it. Then you've got to be consistent, and we hear this a lot. If you can practice regularly over time, you will improve. When I mean over time, I've been running 50 years. So people look at me and say, well, you're quite good and you're quite efficient. Well, it's taken a long time. And people expect, just like putting on weight, you put on weight quickly and they go on a diet and expect to get thin or to lose that weight very quickly. It's a long, slow process. Learning to run is a long, slow process. So if you're in for the long haul, you can do well. So I try and get them used to this long, slow process and work out sessions so they can enjoy it when they're doing their running. And then I like to look at form. I'm a big form runner and working out how they can run efficiently so that they don't get injured. The famous quote is there's two kinds of runners, those that are injured and those that are going to get injured. So yes, we tend to get injured a lot, but I'm trying to work out how to help them do more running so they get injured less. And that's the premise. And then on top of this, we slowly add on little bits and make it a little bit more scientific and a little bit more complex as they go along the way.
There's so many, as you know, over the years, so many experts out there, so many running gurus, so many people that have their own philosophy and take of, like you say, form and breathing and arm carry, no matter what it is. How does one, especially when they're coming into the sport, Mike, how do they get through that? What would you advise them to really listen to?
So I like to simplify it. And I think part of the reason that you talk about my coaching being successful, part of the reason it's become popular, I like to say these days, is I never use a big word when a little word will do. So they get confused. There's loads of words and terminologies thrown around, and don't run in the grey zone, do the 80-20, do zone 2, zone 5. And people, they hear these words, but they really don't know what they mean. So you've got to break it down to the simple elements that they need to do to get fit. And for me, the simple elements are lots of easy running, which we technically call aerobic running, to develop the mitochondria. And we can add on the big words, the capillary and the mitochondria development. But it's just easy running. And so lots of easy running. Some strength and conditioning. You've got to develop the muscles and the core in the body. So we need a little bit of that. We need a little bit of leg speed work. You need the legs to run a bit quicker. That's for technically neuromuscular development. And so I get them to do a few strides. And then we need a little bit of speed work at race pace if they're going to race. And that's about it. So I break it down and say, well, that's all we need to do. Let's look and see that we've got that in the training program at the right time. And then I'll split their programs into simple, manageable blocks that we change periodically throughout the year. And so I try to keep it simple and explain it, adhering to scientific principles, but in a simple way that people can understand.
Yeah, because it can be confusing. Even someone like myself who's been around a while, I'll read something and go, what does that mean? And you investigate and you go, okay, now I know what it means. But what do you think most runners do incorrectly, Mike? Whether they're a newbie or a veteran?
Oh, that's they run too much. I think.
Yeah, I knew. Yeah, well, that's the veterans. I come from the day, as you do too. A couple of times hitting those 100-mile weeks. That was insane. But it's just because. It was just because. It was crazy.
And yeah, so we've been there. I can't deny it. In the 80s, I was hitting those big volumes, and I got injured. And I got injured because back in the 80s, I was taught to land on my heels and to roll forward. And my knees went. I had a condylation patella in the knees, and it took a while to get over because operations weren't as good back then. And so then that was when I started looking at running form. And so what they do wrong is often they overstride and they take the shock through their what we call the skeletal systems. Their stride in front of them is a bit too long. They hit the ground with the heel, and then the shock goes through the ankle, the knee, the hips, and the back, and that can lead to injury. So I try to get people to run as I say, more naturally. If you take your shoes and socks off and run, you'll naturally run correctly because if you get it wrong, it hurts. And that's how I teach them to run. It doesn't mean I'm not a proponent to say you can't land at heel striking, you can't do this or that. I just try and get them to absorb the shock underneath their body through the muscular system, and that will reduce the chances of getting injured. And then running correctly to reduce the chance of injury is slightly different from running quickly. So I have to differentiate when people say, yes, but I want to run fast. And I say, well, then you need to hit the ground hard to go fast, because the more force you can generate, the quicker you're going. But that will increase your risk of injury. So I like to explain to people what they're doing and why they're doing it, and then we take the calculated risks as we're going along the way. But generally, if I can with beginner runners, I'll try and get them to ride. Even if they're not doing triathlon, I'll try to get them to ride a bike and to swim, to do some non-impact form of aerobic training to help with the fitness so that they don't need to do as much running.
Hold on, everyone. We'll be right back after a message from our sponsors. Curad, the official medical supplier of Ironman. Let Curad keep you strong so those strains and pains of training and you trying to find your finish line go away. With their wraps, braces, and tape, and especially their far infrared kinesiology tape that'll keep you strong through all your training. Check out their products today on Amazon.com, at Walmart, and Ironman.com, and let Curad help you find your finish line. Well, we're talking with Mike Trees, Run NRG. He's an expert, many years putting that foot to the ground. But Mike, let's now dive in talking running and our beloved triathletes.
Yes.
and how important it is. And, you hear all the time, and I've heard it in the sport, that swim and bike, get that done, stay strong for that, and the run will come because you can run, walk. And I always thought that teaching or philosophy, what are you doing? It's 3 disciplines here. So talk to me a little bit about how important it is to have that strength in the run of a triathlon, no matter the distance.
So back in the day, duathlons and in triathlon, I was possibly one of the fastest runners in the sport. I wasn't the world's best because my swim wasn't as good. But I think I nailed it quite well to get off the bike and run. But to get off the bike and run well, you need to be a strong cyclist. And this is the problem, that good runners tend to struggle on the run because their legs aren't strong enough off the bike. So you need to get the cycling strong first. And then the running, it's about you're getting the aerobic fitness off the bike and through the swim. So actually a triathlete can cut down on some of that easy aerobic running that triathletes do. And if you're doing Olympic distance stuff, you can focus on the leg speed work more. Ironman people, they need to put the distance in their legs, but you can still use in training the cycling to get some extra distance and then do shorter runs off the bike. If you've done a 4-hour bike, you don't then need to do a 2-hour run off the bike. A half an hour run will suffice. So you can mix it up quite a lot. But there's no getting away from it. If you're going to run an Ironman, you're going to run a marathon, you need to put some 30k or 20-mile runs in there at some point in the training. So it's just intelligently building up that schedule that you get the right components in to hit the race distance that you're going for.
So is with the running kilometers, running miles that people believe they should log when they're training for, say, a 70.3 or an Ironman. Is that something they need to kind of throw by the wayside and really go on anaerobic or aerobic threshold and all that good stuff? I mean, because people get caught up with miles, don't they, Mike?
Yeah. So you've hit this is a very good question, and it's one of my It's one of my pet subjects. I never log miles, so I coach people, and they say, "Well,
really, wait, you never all the years you've been running, you never log miles?"
No. Well, let's go back. When I was doing my 100-mile weeks, I logged miles religiously, but I ended up just putting junk miles in because I wanted to hit the 100 miles. It became the aim, and it was something you pick up along the way, but it shouldn't be the goal to run 100 miles a week. It should be the goal to put a program together that meets the needs as a coach, to meet the needs of the athlete to get where they need to be. And I believe that triathletes need to log time. So if my example I use to beginners getting in the sport, if I swim 5 kilometers in a day, that's a heck of a workout, and I'm beaten. If I run 5 kilometers, that could be quite tough if it's a 5k race, but it could also be very easy. Now, if I cycle 5 kilometers, that's a waste of time. I've done nothing. So we can't compare distances across the sports. Since we're training for three disciplines, the only thing we can really compare is time across the sports, how much time we're doing in each discipline, and how hard the heart is working. So I like to look at heart rate or perceived effort over time and the time they're training at, and hit certain. We like to call them zones at the moment, zone 1, zone 2, but right. I like to work in certain areas. So we get a zone where it's an aerobic zone, or we might need to do some anaerobic work. We might need to be in some power work. And so I'll work on heart rates and time. And that's, I think, is much, much better. Or power, if we're on the bike and it's coming in running as well. Power, I'll work on power as well. And I'll work in time in drills, in power at high cadence on the bike, and time in the different zones, speed work that we're running at. And if people log, I mean, our Garmin's or whatever you use, your Sunto, your Polar, your Chorus, they all log the distance. So if you want to look at the distance at the end of the week, that's fine. But only look at the end of a week out of curiosity, just to see where you're at, not as a target.
At so many, as you know, because you're in the coaching world and you have a lot of those athletes under your tutelage, we're in the off season right now. But so many triathletes have their year planned out. They have to because of travel and all that good stuff. You know what Olympic distance they're doing, what 70.3, what Ironman they're doing. What importance right now during the off season for those events does running have to them? I mean, should they be logging that time? Should they be working on form? What should they be doing right now?
So I like to call the off season. Well, for me, I call the off season the 2 weeks or the 1 month after the race is finished. So your last race of the year, you take an off season, which people also get wrong. An off season again comes back to I'll take 3 or 4 days where I do nothing, but then I'll start moving. So they think, off season a month, I'll do nothing. Well, no, don't do nothing, please. Don't just sit down on your bum. Get out and move, but don't really log it. It's not structured. So get out in the mountains and walk or ski a little bit. Do something different from normal. If you ride a road bike, get on a mountain bike. If you like sailing, it's a chance to look at your sailing. I'm coming up with other things. You might want to row. You might just like taking the dog for a walk. But unstructured, informal movements and different movement patterns than you're used to doing, because as triathletes, we get certain patterns, always swimming the same way, always cycling the same way, always running. So let's get out and move in different patterns. CrossFit's a great sport. It's got a bad rap from some people, but it's moving the body in functional movements that we do for real life. And so that's an off season, and that could be up to a month, depending on how you structure. If you work a year's plan, I would give you a month off season, but probably only 3, 4, 5 days of total rest. Then I would go into what I call base training. So it's, for many people, they call this the off season because they're not racing. But I like to look at it as base training, where you're building an aerobic base, and the aerobic base is the key to everything. The bigger we can get our aerobic engine, the better we go. This is what people call the mitochondria development, which are the powerhouse of the cells. They create the energy that the cells use, and the more aerobic training we can do, the better our mitochondria development becomes. The more dense they become, the more we create, and also the capillary development. That the capillaries get the oxygen to the muscles. So it's great to do this work in the non-racing season, and long, slow, easy training is great for that. And if you're looking at elite athletes, you get a more structured program. But for many people, just get out and do long, easy stuff, easy training, and that'll develop it. I like to do strength and conditioning, the non-racing. You get tired, the muscles will fatigue. So it's good not to be racing at that point when you introduce a strength program, because you're going to have tight, it's what people say, oh, I want the six-pack. Well, it's not really developing a six-pack, but often, that's what people think of it. But you're developing the muscles that you need to hold the body together better, so you can work more efficiently for longer when you run. And then I also give them a little bit of leg speed work. I mentioned this earlier in the thing. I like to get people just doing easy strides with a very gentle jog back to the start and then stride again, just no more than 10 seconds, because it doesn't really fatigue you, it doesn't build up lactate, it doesn't have any negatives, but it helps what we call the neuromuscular development, get the messages from the feet to the brain so you land better. Helps with efficiency and become more efficient. And then once in a while, just so we don't forget the pain of racing, I'll get them to go out and do a 5K run or something of that description. Park runs are becoming popular around the world, and I think once in a while, even in winter, we need to get out and just do something a little bit hard so we don't forget. And that's four simple elements, and that's what I'll get them to do in the off season.
Well, I love that, Mike. Your philosophy of, I'm going to remind them of the pain of racing. Let's get them into a 5K. Yeah. I love that. Oh, good goodness. So, someone's got a race in June. This time of year is great for core strength too. I had an athlete come up to me. I forget what race it was this year. It was in July or August. Could have been Lake Placid, and I knew him, and he PR'd. Yeah, Mike, I go, why do you think that happened? I was making conversation. Oh, I did a couple of Spartan races in the early part of the year, and I got so much stronger. And then he said, well, because I didn't want to be a slob in a Spartan race, the obstacle race, so I got into the gym. Well, that made him strong. And I go, well, it made you stronger for Spartan because that's what you keyed on, but it also made him stronger for his Ironman race, which he PR'd in. Do you see that? Because you talked about cross-training as something that really helps.
Oh, I've actually started CrossFit this year. And I've been doing weight training for a while. And as we get older, I'll take a little bit of science that from the age of 40, generally, our human growth hormone, it trades off. Basically, pretty simply, we lose about 1% of our muscle mass a year if we don't do anything about it from the age of 40. But we can do something about it, and we can get in the gym and build up the muscles, and we can reverse the losing of our muscle mass. And so for many years, I've been weight training now. But I was getting a little bit bored with just going to the gym. I just don't find it motivating. But I've now got into CrossFit, and I actually take private lessons as well to get the form right, to make sure that I'm not just trying to hit heavier and heavier weights. I'm doing it technically correct, functionally correct, so I'm not going to get injured. But I just love the fact that there's some aerobic stuff in there, there's some anaerobic, there's some heavy lifting, there's some short. It's just the variation. It doesn't have to be CrossFit. There's a million and one different ways. For me, it hit a chord. But there's a million and one ways of doing this functional strength work. I love getting athletes who don't like going to the gym just to do cross-country running with me. They'll come for a run and they'll say, here's a branch, we're going to do 10 pull-ups on this branch and run off. And we do this in the cross season. Okay, we're going to do 10 push-ups. We're going to do some burpees. And people get surprised initially. I thought we were going for a long, easy run. I said, well, it is a long, easy run, but it's got a bit of strength work in because we need to get that strength in as well. And after they get past the initial shock, we have fun. And I then will take people out and say, okay, everyone picks an exercise, because you all pick an exercise you like doing. So the exercise you pick might be one that I hate. So we all get a variety of different exercises on a run. And I like to mix it up. But you hit the nail on the head when you said with his Spartan racing, he's working different muscle groups, and that's what's helping him. And I think another thing that I found specifically is getting more technically. We sit down, you and I are sitting down here now, we're on our bums, and our glutes are the biggest muscle in the body. It's also the laziest muscle in the body. And many of us, our glutes have switched off. So I see runners who are running just driving from the quads and the hamstrings, and their glutes aren't working. So I like to get them in the gym to do exercises to work their bum muscles to get them stronger, because that's what they need to use on the bike, and that's what's going to help them run quicker as well. And so it is super important to get that gym work in, and I'm a real advocate of gym work and working out that strength training for the particular needs of the athlete, so that they're doing something they enjoy doing. Is the other thing. If you don't enjoy doing it, it's not going to last. It goes back to my thing. We've got to have fun. If you don't enjoy doing it, you're not going to do it for very long, and you've got to be consistent over time.
Yeah, and I love that, Mike, taking them out for a run, making them do 10 burpees. Mixing things up and throwing in that variety is what does make it fun. That's absolutely perfect. Injuries. You as a coach, that has to be one of the toughest things that you have to deal with your runners, with your triathletes, isn't it?
So as a triathlete, I've famously said, you've got to be pretty badly injured not to be able to train. So there's something we can do. So I'll take it back to my lesson. I broke the leg. I was in traction for 2 weeks, so I can't move. And I just said, look, I said, the guys in rehab, can you bring me some arm weights? And we had this discussion, and they initially, after they got past the shock, they bought me some dumbbells, and I sat in bed doing different exercises with my arms and the dumbbells just to try and get the heart rate up so that I could keep a little bit of fitness going, which helped when I got out of hospital. So even in that dire situation, I was able to do something. So even when we're injured, we're usually able to do something. You've got to be pretty badly injured not to be able to do anything. So it's finding out what we can do to keep fit when we get injured. But more than that, it's how we can stop ourselves getting injured in the first place. So as a coach, it's talking to the athlete and getting them to listen to their bodies. And I find that's the hardest thing. There's something in our brains that think, I know it's niggling a little bit, but I can just get through this. And we should be thinking, that's a warning sign. Let me just take a week off running now when it's just a little niggle and I don't think there's anything serious. And let me just do a little bit more swimming or something else. But they tend to go quiet. I've picked up the signs now when people are getting those little niggles, and we try and get in there earlier. But as I say, there's only two kinds of runners, those that have been injured and those that will get injured. So my job is to pick out those niggles quicker and get onto a different form of training so that it doesn't get too bad.
How do you deal with older runners versus the younger runners? I mean, it's two different planes, two different dynamics and objectives. But what's the same about them both that you're able to cross over from talking to an older runner to talking to a younger runner?
So there's two things in that. One is running is a one-way journey. And don't want to be sort of too fatalistic, but we start off as a child and we grow through and we hope we have a long and healthy lifestyle. So what you give a junior to do is going to be different from someone who's run 10 years and in their 20s. That's going to be different from what I give someone who's just starting running in their 40s or who's been running from 20 years and they're now 50 years old. So it's a one-way journey, and we have to vary what we give them. And then the other part of it is that if you're new to the sport, you might be old chronologically. For example, Mike, you and I are probably the same age. We're around, in our 60s. And if someone comes to me then yes, chronologically, but they're older. But it might be their joints are still fresh. They haven't done much exercise. They might have done a bit of swimming, and they're still new as runners. So I can actually give them a lot more running than I could give myself, for example, because I've been running so long. So I have to be careful in how much running I do because I've been running for so long. But if you're new to the sport, you can give people more. So you need to look at each individual runner in each case. But in essence, it's a one-way journey. I look at the age they're at and give them a different training routine based on their age and also how long they've been in the sport. That'll develop it. And then what the relative strengths are. Yes.
Yeah. It is amazing how many triathletes I'll bring to a finish line and they're in their 60s for their first Ironman.
Yes.
And they run an amazing marathon. And I'm going, wow, that's quite. Then I look at the bio, they started running when they were 54.
Yeah.
I'm going, well, they got great joints. They haven't beaten them up all those years. And there's something to be said about that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm getting beaten by guys now that they say, oh, no, I'm not as good as you, Mike. I said, you are. You're better than me. You've beaten me. He said, no, I haven't got your background. I said, well, no, you've just matured later. It's just that a lot of us that were racing when younger, we've sort of not burnt out, but in essence, there's a candle there, and it's harder to keep pushing at that same level. And these people that come in later in life, they're more motivated, they get out, and they've got this latent talent. So, it doesn't mean that just because you're starting late, you can't actually do very well in your age group and achieve great things.
Mike, why do you think trail ultra running is growing so rapidly? Do you think that is like the Ironman of running, or that next big goal? Because I used to run trails, so much because it was easier on my body. But now they're running, 60, 80, 100K races through no man's land. Why do you think that's becoming more popular?
It's the desire to go further and longer and do and achieve more. So we as kids, we come into sport, I think, and we want to run faster and faster. And then many people realize, well, actually, I can't be the fastest runner out there, but I want to achieve something. And I think distance has become a way that people like to measure their success. So they say, well, I can't be the fastest marathon runner, and anyone can do a marathon. I know that sounds right, because not everyone can do a marathon. It takes hard work to achieve a marathon. But once they've done a marathon, they want to move on to the next level. So with Ironman, it's then the ultras and the longer distance. And so they then do longer distance running. I think it's easier organising longer distance in the countryside than in cities because less road closures. Right. It's also a heck of a lot more fun. I mean, I hate running on the roads. You give me a trail and I just love to be out there all day. And I'm not counting the distance. I'm just looking at the scenery and just thinking, oh, just get up that hill. I can have a little rest on the other side and enjoy the view and move on. And so I think it's just a great environment to be in and people enjoy it. And also that just desire to push themselves a little bit more and achieve a little bit more. And because the volume of runners is going up and up all the time, more and more will gradually progress. If the pyramid's big enough at the base, the height will go higher. And so there's more people feeding into the sport to do these ultras. It's great for the sport. And ultra running and distance running is fantastic.
It's you talk about the road and running on the road, and it's just so hard on the body, and that's why I went to trail. But the other thing is, for triathletes, I think it's fantastic that in the off season they can run a 35, 30, 40, 50 mile trail run. That's their marathon training for the Ironman. You think that works?
Yes. Oh, definitely. In the off season, as we call it, the non-race season, keep moving. Anything works. It's just being consistent over time and building up that aerobic engine. And trail running is great because you're not on the flat. You're going up and down. And hill training is fantastic. I mean, Arthur Lydiard in the 60s, again, a Kiwi, would come back to New Zealand again, one of the best running coaches ever been. He would get his guys on sand dunes in the hills. And this is functional strength training. So you can go to the gym and you can lift weights, or you could just run up a hill. It's going to give you pretty much a very similar thing, but the fact is running up a hill and they're going to be carrying water and extra weights on them, so they've got their weight training there, or their resistance training going up the hill, but it's functional, which is natural. They're working the muscles they're going to work when they're racing, so it's great development. And they're not logging the times per se, because they're not on the road thinking, oh, that was a 7-minute K, that's slower than I need to be going. You can't really work out the time and the distance per se in the mountains, because it's so tricky and it varies. But sorry, not the time, but you can work out the time you're out there and just enjoy being out, working the heart and lungs for time. And I always like to say that the heart doesn't know how far you've run. It just knows how hard it's working and for how long. And that's why trail running is great. Just get out there and get the heart in the right zone naturally without thinking about it too much for a long time, and you'll get fit.
Mike, with your coaching business and so many years of learning, and we're learning every day, but what do you look for, and how you choose other coaches that you mentor or under your tutelage, or how do you look at those, and how do you assess, and how do you work with other coaches like that?
So we're growing rapidly and taking on coaches, and what we look for is a people's person. They don't have to be the fastest runner out there. In essence, being a good runner doesn't, as we discussed earlier, doesn't make you a good coach. They need to be a good listener. They need to understand what the person they're coaching really wants. And then they have to be able to put a simple structured plan together for that person. And what good coaches can do well is they can fit that plan into the athlete's lifestyle. So I would say to someone, swim Monday, Wednesday, Friday, here's the plan. And then you find out actually all the local pools are shut on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you can't just throw any old plan together. You have to sit down and say, when do you work? Okay, you're a student, so when are your exams? When are you not going to be able to trade? So June's out because you're going to be studying for exams. Let's give you an easy June. It might be that it's a single mother with a job. Okay, so you've got all these problems, but you do have a lunch break, and you're prepared to sacrifice half an hour of your lunch break to run, so we can get a regular pattern of doing some training at lunchtime. So it's sitting out and working out, for me, a lifestyle pattern, and working with my coaches to make sure they understand that anything they build fits into a lifestyle pattern, stretches the athlete, but is a realistic goal. And if they can get that, I think they can be good coaches. They also have to have a good scientific knowledge. I mean, that's taken for granted that they've got a sports science background and understand what they're talking about. But I get frustrated with coaches that will use too many big words, as I like to say, and they try to look clever. And don't try and look clever. We know you know the subject, but the people you're talking to don't know this subject. So keep making it simple so they understand what you're getting across. And as they learn, you can introduce more technical terminology.
Wow. Mike, on recovery with massage and things like Normatec compression boots or Hyperice, the massagers and things like that. Are you a proponent of that?
Interestingly, yes, I am, is the simple answer. My orthopedic consultant, this is an interesting story, Dr. Matt Brick, he was 2 times duathlon world champion. And he used to come to Japan, and we would race for a BMW car every year in Japan. And unfortunately, he beat me every year, and he won this car many times. And then the first year that I won, they'd taken the car away. So that was my first national title.
What'd you get? What'd you get out of the car?
Oh, actually, I got $20,000, so it wasn't. It was a good payday.
That's so bad.
It wasn't so bad, but so I did very well. I can't. But anyway, I've come to New Zealand. He's now my orthopedic consultant. So my rival in the 90s, good friend, and then he's now my orthopedic consultant. But he lives by chance about 200 meters from me, and he's building an ice bath. And a hot pool, and he's done all the research. So he's done all the hard work for me as a doctor, orthopedic consultant. He knows his science, and he said, Mike, we're going in this ice bath every week, 11 minutes per week ice baths, and it seems that the science is showing that it could actually extend your life and stop and slow down the aging process with people. So ice baths, hot baths, massages to flush out the system. It incremental gains, as we say, and it does help. And I think the new thinking now is ice baths is possibly some of the best. Ice with hot and cold treatment is some of the best to help regenerate the muscles. So big into that. And for people who haven't got it, the things like the Normatec boots, they're fantastic. They're a game changer in terms of you can sit there after a race and just help massage. That you can't necessarily get to that massaging area yourself. You can't always afford to have a physio do that massage work for you. So they all play a great part in my view.
When one of your athletes does get injured, how do you help them seek help in their local area? A lot of people just don't have contacts or the types of people they work with that can do that. Where do you send them? So
I'm very, very lucky that I've created a global network now of physios and osteopaths and massage specialists. My wife is actually a massage therapist and acupuncturist. She spent university studying acupuncture in Japan. So we've got a good network. So I'm lucky in the sense that I can send people to the right area. So when they come to me, but they've just got to start talking to other athletes. And I think word of mouth is good. We have a big network and there's lots of forums out there. And get on these forums and talk and ask for people in the area. And you soon get a good reputation of people to work with. And it's super important to get in, to see someone early. And so, for example, on my Instagram page, I get lots of questions. I can't legally consult on injury because I'm not a doctor. I'm not qualified to talk about injury. So a good coach will always pass on the area of expertise they don't have. So I always get people to go and talk to a physio, introduce them to someone they can talk to. And that's the first protocol. But what people need to do is they need to take control of their own injury. They need to accept that these people they work with, they only work with them. They're not going to do the work for them. You still have to do the rehab program, the weightlifting if it is, and gentle massaging yourself or stretching as it may be, or some dynamic movements, some yoga. So don't go to a consultant and expect them to fix you. An athlete still has to fix themselves, and that's what I'm big on. Getting them to the right area, but getting them to do the work themselves to get over the injury. And not, the final thing is learning from their mistakes so that we do make mistakes and trying not to make the same mistake twice. So I don't want them getting the same injuries over and over. We try and get over that one and move on.
And talking to so many athletes, Mike, too, the other thing is don't get depressed about it. Don't knock yourself. It happens to everybody. Like you say, it's injuries waiting to happen because people mentally get down on themselves, and then it takes them even longer to come out of it, even when the injury is healed. Do you see that too?
Oh, you've hit the nail on the head with this one. So my wife is actually one of my biggest fans, and she said when I was lying there, I was in the hospital, and I was hoping to win Kona. That was my goal. And you don't know if you can. I wanted to be in the mix and think I want to get in the podium. If everything's right, I might even win it. That was the dream. So we have the dream. And I smashed my leg. I'm on the table, and the doctor said, Kona's out. Everything's out this year. You've just got to learn how to walk again. And my wife looked, and she was on a video call, and the doctor's there, and she looked and she said, "Are you unhappy?" And I said, "Nope. I'm just going to do the best rehab I can. I'm going to change the mindset. Now the mindset is training for rehab." So I cut the races out, and every day I look forward to my rehab, and it was fun. I thought, what program can I do? I remember walking with the crutches. I was doing 2 lengths down the ward. Okay, we'll do 3. We'll do 4 today. Now can we do 4 with a little squat? Can I do a few push-ups? How can I add progression in to add more? And I made a whole program, and I enjoyed the rehab process. So it's a mindset. if you focus on it and make that rehab the goal to get better and put the racing to one side, you can enjoy the whole recovery process. It's a different aspect of life. And you monitor it. So you say, well, yesterday's a bad example. 3 weeks ago, I was in a wheelchair. Now I'm on crutches. And then you look back again. Oh, I was in a wheelchair. I was on crutches. Now I'm walking with a limp. I was on a wheelchair, crutches, walking with a limp. Actually, now I can run with a bit of a limp. And then you can monitor that. And so monitor it so you can see the progress. And seeing the progress that you're making can get those happy hormones, as I say. So you start to see the positive things and not the negatives. So it's a mind game. And it's working with the athletes to get their mind in the right place so they don't get depressed.
Yeah, what they've got to realize, they create their own happy hormones. They just don't appear from somewhere.
Yeah. But it's a different story when you're a pro and your money's coming in and you're feeding a family. That's different. But when we're amateurs and and to be honest, I'm now coaching. I'm not coaching professional runners and athletes much. It's mostly the age group, the fun runners, and it's a hobby. So we can indulge ourselves and do it. But a professional who's watching their livelihood go down the drain, it is a bit more stressful. It's a much harder thing to do to keep them motivated.
Well, Mike, my last question on Find Your Finish Line is always the same. It's called tri-table racing. It comes out of the Baja 1000. I've got friends that race trophy trucks and everything through the 1000, and afterwards they sit around. It's called table racing. They reminisce about the event or an event 2 weeks ago, whatever it may be. So why don't you try table race with us and reminisce, share a memory about an event, good or bad, that just pops into your head?
Well, for me, it's got to be Kona this year. I don't believe that I'm the best Ironman athlete in the world, but getting to the start line, it wasn't the finish. It was getting to the start line was my goal. I didn't believe I could finish it, and I got to the finish line, and I've done many crazy things, but I think that was the hardest journey I've had, to come from that to the finish line, and sitting here now, I still can't believe how I've done it, and reminiscing, just I had a focus, and the focus, I was able to put the pain out of my mind to get that finish line. And now my focus is lasting the next 6 months till I can get these rods out of my leg and start again. But that was the hardest thing I've done ever, and that's probably what I'm most proud of. Even though I didn't get in the podium, as many people, and I realised, as a racer who's tried to be elite all their lives, it's different ways of winning. Getting to the finish line was the goal, and that to me was the victory in this race.
And you know what? That's a great philosophy. There are different ways of winning. I got to remember that one. I may steal that one from you, Mike.
No, please do.
Well, Mike Trees, it's been an honor having you on. You're
the honor's all
knowledgeable.
mine. To be on Mike Riley's podcast, honor's all mine.
Well, I appreciate that. And thank you again for your time and all you do. Where can people find you and look you up and follow you and all that good stuff? Mostly,
we're on Instagram. We decided to own the Instagram platform. It's at run.nrg. So very simple. And I post daily tips, always for free, as many good tips as I can, in-depth tips to help people run and help them learn how to run. And it's a run-based podcast, not a triathlon, not podcast. It's a run-based page, not a triathlon page. We have other athletes focusing on triathlon.
Yeah, so no matter if you're a triathlete or you're going to run a rock and roll marathon, whatever it is, they got to come to you.
But triathletes have to run as well.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't think so,
Yeah.
Thank you again, Mike Trees,
for all you do.
Me. Yeah, all you do for our sport. And I can't tell you how much of an honor to have you on. So
thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you to all of you for joining in again on Find Your Finish Line, presented by Active Ice, the official topical pain relief partner of Ironman, and Curad, the official medical supplier. So take care of yourselves out there. Have a great off season, if you call it that. Find us on Apple Podcasts and everywhere, and send us a review. We'd love to hear it. And always remember, you're the cause of your own experiences, everybody. Keep those experiences positive, and they will get you to your finish line. Aloha.